Okay, hopefully this is working now. Fingers crossed. Technical difficulties. I'm still waiting for this to, waiting to verify that this is actually coming up. Where is it? What the heck is going on? Okay. Are we actually live now? It appears so. All right. Sorry for all the technical difficulties. Let us try this again. All right. Welcome to night 16 of our 24 nights of live streams, and we're going to take a break from going through the 2024 legislative package, and instead tonight we're going to talk about election mechanics and a general strike in the ballot box. If you got any questions, feel free to pop them in the chat. And as always, we start these sessions off by reciting the preamble to the Constitution. We, the people of the United States, in order to form a more perfect union, establish justice, ensure domestic tranquility, provide for the common defense, promote the general welfare, and secure the blessings of liberty to ourselves and our posterity, to ordain and establish this Constitution for the United States of America. That's our mission statement as Americans. Those are our goals. Those are our duties, both individually and collectively. And America has gotten off track. So the American Union can help get us back on the right path to where we are fulfilling those 5 duties. And, you know, there's a lot of people in this country who believe in the Constitution, who care about the Constitution, and yet we've still gotten off track. So why is that? Why can't we stay on track? Well, part of the reason is the way that our elections work. And so tonight we're going to look at those. And first, let's just take a quick look at the polls. See what is the status of the 2024 election cycle. And right now, here's the nationwide polling as well as the 7 battleground states. And you can see, as I've pointed out, every single time we've looked at the polls over the last 16 days, neither candidate, neither Donald Trump nor Kamala Harris, is able to get more than 50% in the polls. We are a very narrowly divided country, and part of that is on purpose. The political parties purposely keep us polarized, keep us pitted against each other. You see my video box is blocking. This is Arizona, is this last 7th swing state there. But again, you can see how close the polling is in all of these. 0.5%, 0.8%, 0.9%, 1%, 1%, 1.3%. It is a very small percentage of voters that will decide the outcome. That being said, Americans want a third party. So why don't we have one, or 2, or 3, or 4? You can see this is a poll from, I want to say last October. showing that we reached a record high of 63%. And I think I've talked about this graphic before. And the question is, do the existing parties do an adequate job of representing the American people, or do they do such a poor job that a third major party is needed? Again, this is because this phrases the question in a way that those are your two choices. Are you satisfied with the representation that the two parties give us, or is there do you want another option? And so we'll talk about why unionizing as voters is a better option. Why don't we have a third party? Because math. Math does not care about our feelings. And so it doesn't matter how many people want a multi-party system in the United States, our elections are not set up for that. Some people want to address this with voting reforms. Ranked choice voting is a popular one. With ranked choice voting, you can have a bunch of candidates on the ballot, and you vote for who you want. And if that person can't win the election, then they're eliminated. And then your second choice, you rank all of the candidates that you want in the order that you want. It's also called instant runoff voting. And we've got some good data on this. Maine has actually been using this. They adopted it in 2016. And so we've got some good data on it. And so the pitch for ranked choice voting is you can vote your conscience, that you're not throwing your vote away. You can vote for a third party without your vote being wasted, without it being a spoiler. But again, we have data on this, on what it looks like in Maine. So you're not seeing any third parties run good campaigns, big campaigns. We've had a handful of independent candidates over the last few years. The one exception is sitting Senator Rufus King, but he was elected as an independent even before Maine adopted ranked choice voting. So that wasn't the issue. But with the exception of his re-election campaign, we can look, and in every single election, with ranked choice voting, with people having the option to vote their conscience, with people having the option to vote for a third party candidate or an independent candidate, and know that they weren't going to spoil the election, the Republicans and Democrats combined never got less than 93% of the vote. People are very used to Republicans and Democrats. They're going to continue to win, even with ranked choice voting. In the independent candidates combined, never have gotten more than 7%. There's another voting reform, Final Four or Final Five voting, which was adopted in Alaska in 2020 and is on the ballot in a couple states, Nevada, Colorado, I believe, this election cycle. And so under that system, what happens is all the candidates run. You have a big jungle primary, so similar to what you have in Washington and California, where anybody of any party can run. And then you eliminate all of them but four. So the top four candidates move on to the general election. This is different than California and Washington, where it's a top two, and the top two who come out ahead in the primary go on to the general election. So the idea under the top four is that or top five, this is based on a proposal by Catherine Gell, a political innovator who came up with this as a way to try and disrupt the two-party system. But the problem is that, if you were just using this to decide among four different places where you were going to go have dinner, or four different types of pizza for your office, or four different types of, donuts, anything like that, then this system would work. However, it does not reflect the real world. And in the real world, campaigns cost money. Campaigns are expensive. And so we see in Alaska that after the primary, this election cycle, the two Republican candidates who finished in the top four. The one who got the lowest number of votes dropped out and immediately endorsed the other Republican. So, in the general election for the Alaska's House seat, you have the one Democrat, the sitting incumbent, who got 51%, if I remember correctly, 51% of the vote. You have the Republican, who's been endorsed by the other Republican, and between them they got like 47% of 46% of the vote, something like that. And then you have two other candidates, both of who got less than 1% in the primary. Now, neither of those candidates has a chance at all. Neither of those candidates who got less than 1% in the primary is going to somehow emerge victorious. You still have a two-way race. And you saw this in previous iterations of this 2 years ago, where a candidate, I believe it was the Senate race, the candidate who came in fourth immediately dropped out because they were an independent, and they said, I don't want to spend time and money on running another losing campaign. So they just dropped out. That's the problem with Final Four voting, is that it's still Final Four voting and ranked choice voting both. Problem is that we have a two-party system, and we're going to continue to have a two-party system because of a thing called Duverger's law. And Duverger's law is because elections are a zero-sum game. So you can imagine this as a seesaw. So you got the two major parties. Only one end can touch the ground. The winner can touch the ground and the second place candidate is up in the air. They've lost. Third parties are distributed along this axis because it doesn't matter how many people are voting third party. They do not change the weight on the seesaw. The only thing that matters, the only thing that counts towards getting one candidate to the bottom, to touching the ground, is the amount of voters who are on the seesaw voting for the major parties. Third parties, this is why third parties are often called wasted votes, because again, they are not contributing to deciding between the top two candidates. This is one of the things about ranked choice voting that helps people feel more involved, helps people feel like they're being heard, right? If they're able to vote for their third party and know that it's not going to ultimately change the outcome, but they feel like they got to express their opinion. And so, ranked choice voting isn't bad unless you're telling people that it's going to create a multi-party system, which it very much will not. Elections are a zero-sum game, which means that there's one winner and then everyone else loses. Everybody else loses. And so it's more efficient to have the one loser instead of 2 or 3 or 4 or 5 losers, right? This is why Alaska is not seeing big, many, 4 candidates all running expensive campaigns statewide, because it's expensive. And if you don't have a chance at winning, you're just throwing money away. So it's not very efficient. And so a third party would have to be willing to repeatedly throw money away in order to lose. And that's not very good business. It does not work. So what do we do instead? Let's look at how this has worked in the United States. And I want to look at the 1968 presidential election. In 1968, it was a three-way race. It was a three-way race for president. Richard Nixon, as you probably know, in 1968 was elected president. He got 43.4% of the vote. He beat out Vice President Hubert Humphrey with 42.7% of the vote. And George Wallace was running on the American Independent Party down in the South. running on a platform of states' rights, aka segregation, and he got 13.5% of the vote. He took 5 states, but it wasn't enough. His electoral votes weren't enough to kick the presidential election to the House. He wasn't able to stop Richard Nixon from getting a majority in the Electoral College. All right, so you can see Richard Nixon just barely won. And so what happened 4 years later? Richard Nixon went after the swing vote. He went after the Southern racist who had voted for George Wallace. And one of the ways he did it was by ramping up the war on drugs. And so 4 years later, he had a huge landslide. He pulled in that 13.5% plus some, and got more than 60% of the vote, easily defeating George McGovern in 1972. So, a huge landslide because that block of swing votes was on the table. That block of swing votes was going to go one way or another, and so he made a play for it. He wanted to win. Alcohol prohibition. Alcohol prohibition was brought about by swing voters. There was a guy named Wayne Wheeler, and he organized the Anti-Saloon League into a block of swing voters, so that whenever there were 2 candidates running for office, they would pressure them to support alcohol prohibition on the state, the local, and the national level. And whenever one of them would and the other one wouldn't, their small block of swing voters would help get them elected, help that candidate get elected. And the prohibition, there was a prohibition party, a political party, and they'd been running the candidate since the Civil War for president every 4 years, and they never got more than 2. I think one year they got 2.5% of the vote, because there were very few people who wanted to make alcohol prohibition their single issue. There were very few people who were willing to do that. However, as swing voters, they were able to elect over a period of years, over a decade or so. They were able to elect candidates to the state legislature and to Congress, swinging that small percentage of votes to be the deciders in order to bring about a big enough majority in Congress that the Alcohol 18th Amendment was adopted. And so his strategy was described as turning minorities into majorities. All right, once again, we've already talked about how Americans really want a third party. American politics is ripe for disruption. People want a third way, and 63% recognize that Republicans and Democrats are not looking out for us. And so what is the purpose? Why do we want to elect? Why do we want to elect new representatives, right? Why do people advocate for changing the way that we vote? Why do people advocate for different systems? Because they know that Congress is broken. And so the hope is, if somehow we can elect enough new people, then Congress will be functional again. And why do we want Congress to be functional? Because they are the policy setting branch. They are the ones who set policy, or supposed to set policy, for the United States. So election reform is really means to an end. And the end is getting good legislation on the president's desk. That's why, by crowdsourcing the legislative process ourselves, and you can find a link to the legislative package in the description below. You can download the PDF and see exactly what the American Union's plan for ending poverty, ending mass incarceration, and ending the endless wars is. We create a new voting metric. Did the incumbents get this done before the election, or did they refuse? I want to read this quote by Gandhi beginning the 1930 Salt March. You've heard me talk about last week. about how the American Union is built on nonviolence, how it's a Gandhian Satyagraha campaign. And Gandhi said Satyagraha works only in this manner. It arms the people with power, not to seize power, but to convert the usurper to their own view, till at last the usurper retires or sheds the vices of the usurper and becomes a mere instrument of service to those whom he has wronged. So a union of swing voters isn't trying to defeat any particular politician or party. Instead, the American Union arms the people, the marginalized millions, with power, not to seize power for ourselves, but to convert them to convert the politicians to our service, convert them to make them desire to pass the Trump-Biden peace plan. Even if they're doing it for selfish reasons so they can keep their job, that's okay. The important thing is that if they become a mere instrument of service, that's okay. They can do that, or they can willingly retire. Those are their choices. This is the creative tension Dr. King spoke of. All right. That is why the American Union swing voters can succeed where a third party can't. You can accept the fact that we have a two-party system, thanks to Duverger's law, thanks to winner-take-all elections, and instead focus on the end. The end is getting good policy on the president's desk, and so let's just skip right to that. And so the American Union will make endorsements in all 470 federal elections, in all 470 races, 435 for U.S. House, 34 for U.S. Senate, and for President of the United States. We'll do that on October 30th. There is, instead of doing the lesser of two evils politics, or in case of a third party, trying to defeat both of the two evils, instead we'll play incumbents versus challengers, trying to negotiate a contract extensions for incumbents on our terms, backing one set of demands across all those 470 races. If Congress refuses, there will be consequences. Some of them will be forced into retirement. And if necessary, deny legitimacy to the winner with a random endorsement. This is, we'll talk about more in a second, this is the general strike in the ballot box. Say, you cannot make us fight. We refuse to fight each other, but we can still be the deciders. Now, how many voters does it take to be the deciders? Well, I pulled the numbers, and if you look in 2022, how many voters could have theoretically flipped control of the House? It was 4,000 across 4 U.S. House districts. 4,000 voters could have flipped the House from Republican control to Democratic control. In the Senate, it was 33,000 across 2 states could have flipped it from Democratic control to Republican control. And the numbers weren't much bigger. They were comparable in 2020. And in that case, control of the overall office was decided by less than 24,000 votes across 3 swing states. So it is a very, very tiny percentage of the overall electorate that can control the outcome. And once the parties recognize that fact, that the decision, the election, control of the election is out of their hands, they will have to choose either to retire or to serve the people by ending poverty, ending mass incarceration, and ending the endless wars. All right, so how do we get to that point? Well, direct action, a one-day general strike on October 15th. I think I talked about this on October 2nd, how this is called a hartal. This is what Gandhi used to unite Hindus and Muslims against the British starting in 1919 in India. So it's a day of non-cooperation with the economy. And Gandhi had people organize local meetings and to adopt resolutions in support of their demands. In this case, it's the 21st century, and we can contact Congress directly with our demand, enact the Trump-Biden peace plan within 7 days. As part of the Hartal, businesses should be encouraged to close for 24 hours. Candidates can participate to signal their endorsement of the legislation and their willingness to accept these demands of the American Union, the immediate passage within 7 days. As part of the general strike, avoid spending money, avoid employment, and all who are able should enjoy and observe a 24-hour fast. This is the self-purification, one of the steps of a nonviolent campaign that Dr. King wrote about in his letter from Birmingham jail. So that's coming up in 9 more days. 1 day of non-cooperation with the economy. And as you know, I have been fasting for 16 on day 16 now, and I will continue fasting until October 15th as my commitment, inviting people to join me for 24 hours on the 24th day. That is the Fast for Peace. The Fast for Peace comes from the challenge Gandhi laid out in August 1947. Said the 15th is the day of our trial, observe a fast on that day. And people of Kolkata fasted together and became united in peace. This was a city that had seen horrible divisions, horrible riots over the last year that had left thousands and thousands dead. But through the Fast for Peace, they de-escalated the tensions in the city. The fast is a 24-hour period without food or recreational intoxicants, drinking water only, and mostly on the 15th of the month. Gandhi recommended dinner to dinner, so eat your dinner on the night of the 14th, skip breakfast, skip lunch, and then after 24 hours, drink all the water you want during the day, and then after 24 hours, eat your dinner on the 15th. And I'll be breaking my fast on the evening of the 15th, a little after 7 p.m. My weight is down to 182 pounds. So I'm right on the bubble of healthy weight for my size. I've still got some fat left to burn. I can make it another 9 days. And I've been doing some non-zero amount of calories, a dozen, 12, 20 up to 12 or around a dozen calories a day. A little slice of lime or lemon in my water and vegetable stock, things like that. But for the last 24 hours, starting the evening of October 15th, it will be straight water only for the Fast for Peace, just pure water. I can tell you I'm pretty sick and tired of drinking salty water. The salt and the potassium that's keeping my electrolytes up. And I look forward to enjoying just plain ice water for 24 hours for the Fast for Peace. I hope you join me, and I think there's a pledge form in the description below. If not, you can definitely find it on the website anamericanunion.com. If for some reason that just drinking water for 24 hours would not be good for your health, and if you're not sure, check with your doctor, take a medical exemption. So medical exemption still maintains the spirit of the fast in that shared self-sacrifice that gives us the moral authority to make these changes in the United States, ending poverty, ending mass incarceration, ending the endless wars. Gandhi recommended fruit or fruit juice, whatever the minimum is that you need for your health, but still maintaining the spirit of the fast. And in rare cases, we've had people who observe a fast from other things as well, to share in that, be part of that self-sacrifice. All right, so a union of voters staging a general strike is not an election boycott. Those don't work. The Brookings Institute has looked at the data for the last 30 years of countries, nations, political systems where one party has tried an election boycott. And the idea being we are going to try and deny you legitimacy by we're not going to participate in this contest. And so that will make you look bad because we didn't really participate. And as a practical matter, it does not work, because what that does is it puts your opponent in power. It gives all the power to your opponent. And election boycotts are, I think they concluded, are generally disastrous to the boycotting party. And in a sense, you can see that in the United States too, right? There were 80 million people who did not vote in 2020. Even though, as always, it was the most important election of our lifetime. But they boycotted the election. And as a result, things have been disastrous for the marginalized millions. That's why we need a better way to organize. That's why a union of voters can turn the system around by focusing on policy and refusing to be distracted by partisan politics. Voting for a third party, again, those don't work either. So when I tell people the union of voters will endorse one of the major party candidates in all 470 federal races, you say, well, what happens if they don't cooperate? You're going to vote third party? No. Again, those don't work. The power of a union of swing voters comes from being the deciders. A union of swing voters refuses to be drawn into partisan politics. But you've got to bring the votes to the table so that you create an incentive for politicians and parties to compete for a winning block of votes. The Green Party, for example, has not done very well in the United States. They've been around for 50 years and continue to lose elections. But in other countries where there's a parliamentary system where they actually can bring votes to the table, they have been more successful in getting some of their policies adopted. That's how you get influence. That's how you influence the legislative agenda, the policy decisions, is by bringing your votes to the table. And so last, as we talked about, a union of voters makes an endorsement at random if they are ignored. You always believing the best in people, believing that they have a chance to be better, a chance to reform, a chance to improve themselves. But if they don't, you still have to be the deciders. And it's that threat, especially once the threat has been delivered in one election cycle, that will continue to bring politicians and party to the table going forward. So what does that look like? Well, for the presidential election, we're using game theory, gamification, and we're using game theory, the prisoner's dilemma. And so we've got a chart here. If both parties cooperate, then the historic Trump-Biden peace plan gets enacted. If Kamala Harris cooperates and Donald Trump refuses, then Kamala Harris wins election. Sorry, I swapped out Biden's picture, so it should say wins election, not re-election. And Donald Trump forfeits the election in Congress. It goes the other way too. Republicans cooperate, Democrats don't, then Republicans win everything. And if neither cooperates, then there's a random endorsement, and both sides, neither the quote-unquote winner is robbed of the dignity of the office. That for 4 years, everyone around the world will know that they are not there because the people wanted them. They're there because of a random event. And that random event is the closing number of the Dow Jones Industrial Average on October 30th. An odd number means that Donald Trump is endorsed. An even number means Kamala Harris is endorsed. And that's it. There's nothing they can do to stop a general strike at the ballot box. They can't question what people's motives are for voting for a major party's candidates. They can't refuse to let people vote. They can't stop people from learning how the Dow Jones closed on October 30th. There's nothing they can do to stop the people from staging a general strike in the ballot box and delivering the resulting loss of dignity for the winner. But that's the worst case scenario. What do we want? Why do we want to do this? To get good policy on the president's desk. And just because we have the power to destroy a thing, the dignity of the Oval Office, we want to use that to get control of it and use that control to pass good policy to end poverty, end mass incarceration, and end the endless wars. So there's a couple things that you can do to help. First and foremost, help break the polls. Help the American Union show up in the polls. So insist to anyone who asks that you are a true swing voter, that you will vote for. A swing voter is someone who will vote for both Republicans and Democrats, and that you will vote for the American Union endorsed candidate on November 5th. Second, you can become a dues-paying member of the American Union on our website, anamericanunion.com. Now, membership dues are 25 cents a day, $7 a month. And last but not least, you can join the Fast for Peace on October 15th as a way of pledging to vote together with the American Union and creating that moral pressure on Congress to act, to pass the Trump-Biden peace plan within a week and help upgrade America's social contract. Look, we've got the power. We have numerical superiority in the United States. There's 130 million people who are living in or near poverty. You have millions and millions of people who are enmeshed in a racist criminal justice system. You got millions and millions of people who are frustrated by the endless wars and the bloated military-industrial complex that want to see that those resources diverted someplace better. So let's do something about it. And the way we can do something about it is by unionizing as voters. One clear set of demands across all 470 federal races, demanding that Congress act before the election. And then we can let them keep their jobs. If they, what was the quote earlier? If they become committed to service of the people, then great, they can keep their jobs. If they refuse, then they can retire. We can push them out of power and push them out of office. Again, it's literally tens of thousands of people who are going to decide whether the Republicans or Democrats control the House, the Senate, and the Oval Office. So this is why a union of voters is superior to trying to start a third party. The other thing I said I was going to talk about tonight, and I forgot to put it in my notes, so I'll have to pull it up here real quick, is how unionizing as voters is a smart reform. And you may have, if you're in the business world, you may have heard of SMART as an acronym. Stands for specific, measurable, accountable, realistic, and timely. Many years ago when I went through management training back then, it was SMIR, specific, measurable, individual, and realistic. But SMART is a much better acronym. So, does the American Union meet this definition as being a smart reform? Well, when candidates run for office, right, this all from all sorts of office, from Congress all the way up to the president, a lot of times their demands are very nebulous, like reform healthcare or protect the environment. And what does that mean exactly? They get away with nebulous promises because we haven't had any alternatives. So the American Union is specific by writing down exactly what we want Congress to do, by giving them one set of demands and no wiggle room, saying, look, this is it, take it or leave it. We can give them a very specific set of demands. So some people ask me, well, what happens if you give this to Congress? Aren't they just going to amend it and fight over it? No, the simplest way for Congress to pass this as is for leadership in the House and Senate to take a committee of conference, and a committee of conference can replace the text of the bill that they're looking at with the text of the Trump-Biden peace plan. They did something similar in December 2020. You might remember this in the lame duck session after the 2020 election. And they replaced a completely unrelated bill with a 5,593 page package of legislation. And then within a couple hours, it went to the House and Senate for a straight up or down vote. That's the thing about committee of conference reports. There's not any opportunity to offer amendments. It's a take it or leave it offer. You can technically ask to recommit to the committee of conference, but it's an up or down vote. There's no amendments, no opportunity to offer amendments. So we can offer a very specific set of demands, and there's no technical obstacles that would prevent Congress from voting in this just as written. M, measurable. So judging the progress of legislation is pretty easy to measure. Did Congress pass it? Did they put it on the president's desk? Yes or no? And it's yeah, it's easy to measure. And by unionizing as swing voters, so that's the one thing that you measure. The other half of the metric is participation in the Fast for Peace on October 15th. And so for the 1,000 candidates for Congress and the Senate, this is a roll call vote. Either you publicly signal that you endorse this demand of immediate passage of the legislative package, or you refuse. And since social media is public, this also is very measurable. So using these two measurable things, that's how we'll determine the endorsements for all the candidates for Congress. If the incumbents endorse the demands and passed it before the election, they are guaranteed the American Union endorsement. Again, the American Union is built on nonviolence. Everybody is capable of self-improvement, of being better. And so no matter what horrible things a member of Congress has done, they are eligible for the endorsement if they can get this done before the election. If they choose not to, then they can face the electoral consequences. So that opt-in on October 15th is essentially holding a separate election, our own people's election, where candidates will have to decide if they want to compete for the American Union endorsement or not. I did an episode on a live stream on gamification a few days ago, talking about the Nebraska system, if you recall. Sorry, the Oregon system for electing U.S. senators back 100 years ago. All right, A, attainable. Can a union of swing voters gain leverage over Washington? And the answer is yes. That it's literally tens of thousands of voters who will decide. All we have to do is agree to work together, is agree to cooperate, and all decide in the same way. And that's how we can get leverage over Washington. Right now, you've got a House that's 51% Republican, a Senate that's 51% Democrat, and the occupant of the Oval Office won with 51%. I like to say the target goal is 3.5% for the American Union, because that is the percentage of the population that's necessary for a nonviolent movement to achieve political change. But as we looked at earlier, 6 of the 7 swing states, it's 1.5% is the difference between Kamala Harris and Donald Trump. 3.5% is an unarguable amount, but really, because so the things are won on the margins, it can be less than that. And so then the question is it attainable? Is that will incumbents actually want to keep their jobs, or will they want to fall on their swords and say, all right, we're willing to keep poverty and keep mass incarceration, keep the endless wars 3 weeks before the general election. They could, but it's probably not going to do them any favors if they do. So, union of voters getting leverage over Congress is very attainable. All right, so then the next question is it relevant? And as I think we've talked about before, what is relevant to all Americans? And that's the Constitution. That's why we start each of these sessions off by reciting the preamble of the Constitution to remind us of our 5 duties as Americans: to establish justice, ensure domestic tranquility, provide for the common defense, promote the general welfare, and secure the blessings of liberty to ourselves and our posterity. It doesn't matter whether you're a Republican, a Democrat, a Libertarian, a Green, an Independent, a Forward Party person, or you're a supporter of Cornel West or RFK. The Constitution is our common political ancestor. And so that's how we make this set of demands relevant, is by framing the Trump-Biden peace plan into those 5 titles, one for each of those duties, and framing it in that way. That's what makes it relevant. And again, if you are a candidate for federal office, the endorsement from a union of swing voters will be very relevant to a candidate who wants to win, right? Unlike votes for a third party, which we said end up wasted, swing votes are the ones that the candidates need to win. All right, and so then the last T, time-based, timely. Again, the goal is to convert others to our way of thinking, to persuade them to come around to acting towards our shared objective. And that's sort of a modified carrot or stick approach, right? We've got the carrot of electoral re-election, electoral victory, and the stick of electoral defeats. But the only time that you get a chance to wield that is on November 5th, on election day. So yes, this is very much a time-based campaign. There's a very specific timetable. It is not open-ended. Either we succeed this month or we fail. But either way, it will be resolved in the month of October. So we have a specific set of demands. It is measurable whether or not Congress cooperates in meeting those. It is attainable to get control over Congress. It is relevant for all Americans and will improve. A better social contract will improve the quality of life for all of us. And it is a time-based campaign. So unionizing as voters is a smart reform. Again, I invite you to become a dues-paying member of the American Union on our website. And there's a link below where you can sign the strike card as well and commit to non-cooperation with the economy on October 15th in 9 more days. I will be doing the same, refusing to spend money and refusing employment and fasting for the day. All right, we're coming up on the hour. I'm not seeing any questions in the chat, so I think we're at a good spot to wrap things up. So tomorrow we're going to continue on Title IV of the legislative package, promoting the general welfare. We're going to get into monetary reform, banking reform, and unconditional basic income on Tuesday. So let me leave you with a question. There's a lot of conversation about the national debt, and it's up to $34 trillion or something now. And the first candidate I voted for was Ross Perot back in the 90s. And when he ran for president, he ran on balancing the budget because he was very concerned about the national debt, because the national debt was $4 trillion. $4 trillion. And now it's $30 trillion. So my question for you, I want to ask you to ponder, where did that $30 trillion come from? In addition, we've borrowed. Household debt is now up to about $20 trillion as well. And commercial businesses have trillions of dollars in loans as well. Where did we borrow all of that money from? So think about that, and then tomorrow we'll talk about it and rethink how our monetary system should work better. Make it work for us and not the wealthy. Make it work for all of us. All right. Thanks. You have a great rest of your evening, and hope to see you tomorrow at 7.